Hello, everyone. From Rome, Italy, I bid you a warm welcome to ICROM webinar series on global voices, heritage, and pandemics. I'm Aparna Tandon, and I will be moderating this webinar on behalf of ICROM team. For those of you who are joining us for the first time and do not know what ICROM is, it is the International Center for the Study of Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property. ICROM is an intergovernmental organization and it is based in Rome. It is working in its service to 137 member states. It promotes the conservation of all forms of cultural heritage in every region of the world. This is the fourth webinar in the series of ICROM webinars on heritage and pandemics. Recordings of the previous webinars are available at the ICROM lecture series page and it's on its YouTube channel. Conceived within the framework of ICROM's international program on first aid and resilience in times of crisis, this webinar offers a platform for our extended community to share experiences and strategies in order to overcome the crisis resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. First Aid and Resilience is ICROM's flagship program that aims to build capacity for effective disaster risk management for all forms of cultural heritage. A strong and still evolving component of the program centers on community based disaster resilience. It addresses all risks to heritage, including those stemming from conflict or fragile contexts. ICROM is grateful to all its partners, and in particular to the Swedish Postcode Foundation for enabling this exchange. Before we proceed further, I would like to inform you that is, as in previous webinars, you can send your queries and comments via the Q&A icon that you see at the bottom of the Zoom window. Please do not raise hands as we won't be able to respond to them. Your comments or questions should be written in the Q&A box. We will take up some questions after the presentation. In case we are unable to answer all the questions due to the shortage of time, we will respond to them via email in 2 weeks' time. The topic of today's webinar is psychosocial support during crises, stress, fear, and anxiety. All of these are considered as normal reactions to an uncertain and constantly changing situation, such as the one we are experiencing now. Yet, if these lead to depression, substance abuse, or suicides, we would be at the brink of yet another health crisis. Like all other walks of life, heritage sector is also affected. Yet, it is a marginal issue within the heritage sector, which in many parts of the world is still largely informal and unorganized. In extreme cases, there is a stigma attached to mental issues and therefore they're not tackled at all. Yesterday, through another ICROM webinar, we discussed the various meanings and applications of the term resilience and how it relates to notion of moving forward or building back better. Recognizing that people are at the heart of all cultures and creativity, today we will focus on one key aspect of disaster resilience, which is mental health of the communities affected by social upheavals, diseases, and crises. Our discussions will center around questions such as which steps we can take now to support cultural bearers, artists, artisans, and heritage professionals to promote their recovery and enhance their psychological resilience, and how heritage itself could be used to provide psychosocial support during and after a crisis. To explore these questions, I have the pleasure and honor of being joined today by a multidisciplinary panel with varied on the ground experiences. It comprises of Amira Al Saeed from Egypt, who is the executive manager of the Egyptian Heritage Rescue Foundation in Cairo, Amira is the mentor for the first aid and resilience training of ICROM. Joining her is Linda Lenovo, who is the Director of Art Heritage Field and Head of Museums and Art Heritage Department at the Estonian National Heritage Board. Linda is a cultural first aider as well. Tamar Kamitse, Head of International Relations, Department of Georgian Red Cross Society, is joining us. And Tamar also wears the hat of a cultural first aider. And finally, we also have the pleasure of the company of Professor John Morris, who is a historian and a visiting professor at the International Research Institute of Disaster Science in Tohoku University in Sendai, Japan. And with him, Professor Machiko Kamiyama, who is a clinical psychologist and also a visiting professor at the same institute at Tohoku University. Without further ado, I now invite Amira Al Saeed to further elaborate on today's topic. Over to Amira. Thank you.
Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everybody. All over the world, we are facing the same crisis of COVID-19, but with different cultures and capacity of response. During this pandemic, heritage has proven to be a source of resilience and healing. Heritage, as it is the common ground that provides a thread of continuity in a rapidly changing world. However, to provide this thread, I will National Museum of Egyptian Civilization and the Grand Egyptian Museum continuing, transporting, handling, digital and traditional documentation work restoration. Families, even in the holy month of Ramadan, which is full of festivals. Due to the pandemics, our borders
It seems we are having technical difficulties in hearing Amira. So what we are going to do is we are going to pass on to our next presenter, that is Tamar. I just for people to understand what Amira was trying to say was that in this time in Egypt there is a heightened activity around digitization for cultural heritage as the projects are going on. And there is, due to the lockdowns, and I'll just move on to Tamar. Tamar, give me a minute to explain what Amira was trying to say. And in that case, so she was just trying to lay out the issue of how heritage field itself is affected, how there is a lot of mental pressure on heritage professionals. And on the other hand, artisans, cultural bearers have lost their livelihoods or are at the risk of losing their livelihoods. So keeping that situation in mind, we are now would like to bring on Tamar Kamitse from Georgian Red Cross Society to share some practical tips on how we can provide coping assistance and also shed some light on psychosocial support itself. So over to Tamar Kamakamitse.
Hello. Just a moment. I will try to share my screen. And this is an issue for me. Yes. So, dear friends, dear colleagues, greetings from Georgia. I'm so happy to be here with all of you, with the people from the cultural heritage field, and to share some recommendations provided by professionals on how to cope with stress during COVID-19. Today, we will talk about stress and common reactions to the stress, coping mechanism, and referral when professional help is necessary. First of all, we should know that stress is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. It's a normal response to a physical or emotional challenge. Stress occurs when demands are out of balance with resources to coping. Very often people are seeking support from others, trying to find the meaning of what has happened and are taking some actions. But sometimes people try to cope with stress by denial of the main cause of the stress. The vital example of this is when some percentage of the Georgian population denied the COVID-19 existence fact and continued to follow the normal pre-corona way of life. Gatherings, birthday parties, religious celebrations were normal behavior for them. People were accusing police and doctors in violation of their rights to limit some activities. Sometimes they even fought with the ambulance doctors when they wanted to take COVID-19 affected person to the hospital, which resulted in increasing number of COVID-19 affected persons. Coping is a way to avoid and manage stress. Psychological coping during this outbreak is crucial for us and our loved ones. It's understandable for people to experience fear and anxiety in the face of uncertainty. It can help us cope with the situation in the short term. Yet, if the fear and anxiety turn to a long-term condition or become very intense, they wouldn't help people, but rather lower one's ability to adapt and cope with the crisis. Meanwhile, we may also experience other common post-critical incident reactions, such as low mood, insomnia, anger, etc. It's therefore important for us to adjust emotionally in a way that is healthy to both mind and body. Let us discuss the main do's and don'ts during the crisis. We should receive information only from trustworthy sources. Anxiety is fear of unknown, and information helps you, statistics grounds you to make you feel more in control of the situation. As in Georgia, we have the National Centers of Disease Control, which is the best source for the information. As a cultural heritage people, we should educate ourselves with accurate information, such as proper hand washing and cleaning practices, etc. Georgia Red Cross Society prepared training courses on safety and security measures on how to behave during the coronavirus to protect ourselves. Our staff and trained volunteers are working 24/7 for the provision of reliable information to the Georgian population on the hotline, absolutely free of charge. The same happened all around the world. Feedback from our beneficiaries showed that talking and discussing emerging problems and the current situation with our staff and volunteers seriously reduced the stress amongst them. Lots of cultural heritage people, musicians, dancers, approached Red Cross during the crisis as they lost the main source of income. Red Cross psychologists are doing their best to support them reduce their stress. We can continue our daily activities at home, spend our precious time with the family, kids. We can read books, watch movies, make exercises, prepare food. It's the best time to do everything we could not find time to do before. Many of my friends and colleagues started preparing Georgian traditional dishes. Many people started to learn Georgian traditional dances online. Learning foreign languages was also popular among my friends during the lockdown. Fortunately, today everything is digitalized. We can easily communicate with our family, friends, loved ones online. Talking with them, sharing our thoughts and experiences, as well as the daily activities are very important for our psychosocial well-being. Social distancing doesn't mean we need to isolate or distance ourselves emotionally with our loved ones. Be more engaged and share love and care. We should never share information without fact-checking from the trustworthy sources. We should never follow blindly recommendations without fact-checking, as it can lead to irrational behavior, such as excessive purchase of food and medical supplies. In Georgia, we even had some cases of drinking the boiled hot water, as someone on TV recommended people to drink it against coronavirus. People were hospitalized. I'm sure all of us have many such cases in our countries as well. Stigma against people with sickness or people from the most affected regions is another very important issue we face in each and every country, city, municipality, or village. We should never spend too much time looking for information and news. It would only create more fear and anxiety, which I experienced on myself. During the whole week, during the whole days, I was watching TV programs and news related only to the COVID-19 situation in my country. Different discussions, interviews, perceptions, or specialists, politicians, journalists, ordinary people. It was an emotionally very difficult and stressful week for me. After talking with my friends, I decided to reduce watching TV and news, try to do something totally different, not connected to COVID-19. That really helped. I would also like to share with you some examples of coping to stress during COVID-19. First of all, it's seeking help from others. I'm sure all of us experience this. Seeking help from family, friends, and colleagues. Sharing your feelings, thoughts, fear with people we trust is of utmost importance. You feel much better when you understand you are not alone in front of this disease. We always try to make sense of what happened and trying to find positive aspects. Sometimes we can, sometimes not. During the whole period of COVID-19, I was trying to think that this disease changed a lot in the world. We value relationships, friendship, supporting each other much more than before Corona. We value more our everyday activities, everyday routine. Following religious practices are often necessary for coping with the huge stress connected to disease, death of the family members and the loved ones. Georgian Orthodox Christians were celebrating Easter on April 19. State and the health officials called on worshippers to follow the state of emergency regulations, stay at home, maintain social distancing, and watch Easter liturgy on TV. However, those who wanted to attend the Easter service had to go to churches until 9 p.m. and stay there until 6 a.m., not to violate curfew regulations. Meanwhile, as all private vehicle traffic has been banned nationwide, they could only walk to their churches to join in on celebrations. Despite all these challenges, lots of people gathered and prayed in the churches. People believed that nothing serious could happen within the walls of the church, and God will support us to overcome this pandemic. My friend walked more than 10 kilometers together with 2 children to pray in the church during the Easter. She believes that only pure belief and trust in God can save the world. It's worth mentioning that despite the fact of the massive gatherings in the churches during the celebrations, no church clusters appeared. Nobody was infected there. The country managed to overcome pandemics much better than even neighboring countries. Another important issue for us is how can we assist others to cope with stress? First of all, we should focus on physical care and protection. Even tiny actions can help people emotionally. Giving water, preparing tea, showing that you are near. Provision of information, supporting emotional adaptation. The goal of assisted coping is not to cope for others, but to provide minimal necessary assistance to help stressed people begin actively coping in their best interest. But sometimes when we see that our assistance is not enough, we should refer people to the professionals. A referral is necessary when we see their long-term depression, anxiety, stress disorder. This generally happens when something serious happens in people's lives, such as serious problems with health, death, or the loved ones. We should refer people to the professional when we see severe sleep problems, alcohol or drug abuse, when they start talking on suicide, when they have enduring depression, their behavior is inconsistent or is a threat to self or others. In these difficult times, Georgian cultural traditions played a huge role in coping with stress related to the coronavirus. A physical distancing was part of our daily life. Friends, colleagues, family members isolated from each other started different activities through the internet, singing Georgian songs together, identifying the Toastmaster and saying different traditional toasts while eating and drinking, each locked in their homes. I tried to provide you some basic mental health PSS recommendations, which are very important in our daily lives, which can help cultural heritage professionals to overcome these difficult times as well. We should never forget about peer-to-peer support as well. Common problems, common backgrounds, the common situation make it possible to understand each other more, solve or educate the emerging problems together. In case of interest to receive more information, I can provide you with special materials for further reading and experience how can we provide basic mental health PSS to ourselves and others for our emotional well-being, which is often even more important than the physical one. Huge thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tamar, and I'm sorry we've been experiencing some technical difficulties. So I would like to thank our speaker Tamar for sharing some simple but widely applicable strategies for providing coping assistance, as she has rightly highlighted that the goal is not to cope for others, but to provide the minimal necessary assistance to help them begin actively coping on their own and in their own best interest. So now I invite Linda Lenovo, head of the Museums and Heritage Department at the Estonian National Heritage Board, to explain how she is providing coping assistance in her department. So over to Linda. Thank you.
Thank you, Parna. I'm greeting you from a tiny Estonian island called Vormsis. And my keynote will not focus on the impact of the pandemic, closure of sites and workplaces, and distance working on cultural heritage professionals. I won't tell you about online museums or cultural programs, etc. We have done all the same things in Estonia that you hear about from all over the world. We haven't done bad. We just haven't done anything revolutionary. What I am going to talk about is a tough balance between professional and domestic work in this crisis. Nothing I say here is universal. I'm only reflecting on the experience I have and what I've seen and worked with in my own context. Many, if not majority, of the professionals working on the field of cultural heritage are women, often mothers. Their professional contribution in these hectic times is not only affected by by lockdown and having to reorganize the way they work. The fact that children need to be homeschooled might create an even greater disruption, as this kind of domestic workload mostly falls on women. Due to traditional gender roles, but also gender pay gap, the professional contribution of men is often favored over women's, and women are left with most of the domestic workload. And if these women happen to be working professionally, they are obviously, and it's quite normal, expected to fully contribute professionally as well. So what is the reality of a mother working from home who, while facing a new situation, or probably even a new normal, still needs to be innovative, professional, and available to both her colleagues and her children? Is it possible to meet all the expectations when the attention span during office hours is limited to an average of 10 minutes at a time? I'm personally privileged to have a partner who shares all the domestic workload with me, but I also know that in many households this is not the case, and the situation for single parents is even more challenging. I also happen to come from a society that is rather supportive of combining work and family, so another privilege most people in other parts of the world don't have. 2/3 of the people I work with are mothers of small children. One of my colleagues, a single mother of 2, confessed to me that during the first week of the lockdown, she was not able to get any work done. And on the 4th week, she had a complete meltdown. It has gotten better since. We have all gotten a bit more used to the situation, but the day still only has 24 hours. And most professional work for a lot of parents is done during nighttime. A majority of these people are stressed and overtired, on the verge of a burnout. An example of this is sitting in front of this screen. So what am I suggesting? I'm not calling for special treatment of mothers or parents of small children in general. I'm pointing out the need to understand that the experience of this lockdown is very different for the people with children and without children. I'm calling to critically analyze the work that is done, and if possible, downscale the workload even just a little bit. And if downscaling is not an option, not to upscale, not to add any new additional tasks to the already existing ones, especially if the existing ones have not been downscaled. At least that is the tactic and approach I have chosen. It's important to me that these wonderful, passionate professionals would stay sane and healthy so that we can work our way through these hectic times together. What I did in my department was at first analyzing what is the absolute minimum we needed to do. The idea was to give people time to cope with the situation, to find a way to manage the daily life. Also, I've tried to divide workloads so that those of us who can do more, to support the ones among us who cannot. When the situation stabilized, we started to increase the workload from week to week. I truly believe that we are better prepared for the second wave, as it is likely to come, because we have managed to find a flexibility in our own modus operandi, dividing the inner resources and assuring people that their well-being is important to our institution. Without them, we cannot do what we do. I also believe that we have come out of this situation stronger as a team because we feel the support from each other. Obviously, not everybody and everywhere has the opportunity to choose this approach, but I believe that in most cases, a critical evaluation of our tasks is possible and necessary. So, in a nutshell, what I wanted to emphasize is that just as in any emergency, we need to prioritize. We cannot do everything. And we need to take good care of the most important resource, our people, the people who take care of our heritage. So thank you for this opportunity to discuss this topic, and thank you for giving this topic a voice, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Linda. I am Amir again, but I will not open my video. Perhaps you can hear me better. And as you had underscored, there are simple ways in which we can support our colleagues by sharing their workload and showing that we care. This brings me back to what we mentioned earlier, that heritage can be a source of resilience for all of us. And I will share now with you the presentation. Hope it's okay now. So during the day of curfews, traditional paper kites has become in Egypt as a symbol of hope, joy, and happiness. They cover the sky until the sunset, a powerful sign that we are okay. Similarly, putting up the Ramadan lanterns and decoration was the major features of the celebration this year. It brings relief to the communities in street who enjoy preparing it. Community connection appear to be the biggest sign of immunity towards crisis. Inspired from this cultural interaction, the new logo of the Ministry of Antiquity after the reopening is the slogan of the ancient Egyptian civilization, which is life, prosperity, and health. And to illustrate the importance and how heritage is important to people during and after crisis, I would like to now invite Professor John Morris and Professor Kamiyama Matsiko. Professor John Morris was born in Australia, but has lived in Miyagi Prefecture, Japan since 1974. He specializes in Japanese history, especially that of northeastern Japan. Professor Kamayama Matsiko is a clinical psychologist and a retired professor of Yamaga University. Since the tsunami of 2011, they have cooperated in a variety of activities and research projects connected with disaster. Together, they are currently visiting professors of the International Research Institute of Disaster Science, Tohoku University, Senjei. To Professor John.
Sorry there, Aparna, I pushed the wrong button on my screen. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. This is John Morris speaking to you from the city of Tagajo, Japan. I would like to, Machiko, my wife, are members of a group called Miyagi Shiryo Net, which has worked to preserve or salvage heritage at risk after the tsunami of 2011 here which hit our area very badly. I have an awful lot to say and not enough time to say it, so I will start by going straight in to my presentation. It's not, voila. Sorry, right. The title of my talk is Heritage or Just Garbage? How Private Documents Can Help Disaster Survivors and Communities. Stories from Northeastern Japan, 2011. This is, please remember what you're seeing here. This is the very first salvage operation that Miyagi Shiryo Net, I'll call it MSN, conducted after the tsunami. This slide here on the left, the map shows you where it's actually the tsunami warning that was issued on the 11th of March 2011. And this area marked in red is the area where the tsunami was worse. This red X here marks the center of the earthquake that caused the tsunami. And this is off coast here. Oops, sorry. This is a map of the area that was marked red. If you look down at the bottom, you will recognize the cities of Tokyo, Nagoya, Kyoto. If you look further up, you will recognize Sapporo, and you probably don't recognize anywhere else in between except Fukushima. We live in the prefecture of Miyagi, which is around the city of Sendai. And this is a more detailed map, and you can see that the city of Tagajo, where we live, is almost on the sea. Next slide. These are two aerial photos of Tagajo. The one on the left is from before the tsunami. Please notice this river here, and this block of apartments here is where we live. Then the next slide, the photo on the right was taken on the 17th of April, 2011. This is the river. We still live here, and this area has been devastated. The river acted as a natural barrier between our side and the other side, and everywhere, well, almost everything here got wet. How things looked from the ground: rubble, more rubble, and debris. And this rubble is just plain rubble. It is not World Heritage rubble, it's just rubble. That night, the relief centers throughout Tagajo, this is normally a gymnasium, were crowded beyond capacity. So that was the tsunami. To recover from a disaster like that, the first thing you have to do is clean up. But when you start cleaning up, you have to ask yourself, what is debris, what is garbage, and what is heritage? In Japan, you have one thing that raises this problem is that for many centuries, government, administration, and commerce in Japan have been conducted based on paper documents. And in pre-modern society, the dividing line between personal and public spheres was blurred. So there are many collections of documents which relate to the political, administrative, and commercial history of local regions, which are held in public hands. These documents are estimated to number about 2 billion. They are not protected by any laws or institutions, such as libraries or museums. And in the rush to clean up after the disaster, many collections held by old families were at great risk. An unknown number of collections were lost in the tsunami itself, and collections kept in buildings which survived the tsunami were often immersed in seawater, sometimes for several months before being salvaged. Miyagi Shiryo-net is a coalition of historians, students, citizen volunteers, and other things. When we visit owners of collections, sometimes we were welcomed, sometimes we were considered a nuisance, roundly abused, or even threatened with violence. Getting people at all levels, even members of our group, to understand that saving heritage was not in opposition to, nor hindered saving lives, was difficult. These are the operations we conducted up until December 2013. Most of them are on the coast, but you see we have a number of inland operations where there was earthquake damage. I would like to explain to you how salvaging heritage can generate powerful psychosocial support. The salvage operations and the ongoing storing and treating of materials at risk, not just salvaging, but also it's a whole ongoing process which involves many different people. These can provide vital bridging and linking social capital between heritage owners and a wide variety of people outside the owners' community. Moreover, serving as volunteers, these people provides an avenue for a wide variety of people, especially elderly people, to participate in contributing to recovery from the disaster. Continued participation in treating damaged documents provides participants with a place to be, companionship, and a sense of purpose. Moreover, after we salvage documents, giving feedback on what can be learned about a family or community's history from the salvage documents is also very important. This can take the form of cataloging the documents, providing printouts of a digital record, I'll refer to this later, public lectures, you can see public lectures here, or publishing books, booklets that ordinary people can read and about various aspects of past disasters and how people have used this to recover from the disaster. Moreover, cooperating with other specialists, especially psychologists, experienced in support for disaster survivors, can greatly enhance the positive effects of salvage operations for private heritage collections. Professor Kamiyama has led a team of clinical psychologists to assess the value of the salvage operations we conducted after March 2011. In these, the evaluation process consists of interviewing owners of who have experienced salvage operations 3 times. The interviews appear to just ask the owners to list what words or thoughts come in mind to relation with the salvage experience. But the interview process itself helps the owners organize their thoughts and is a powerful form of non-intrusive psychotherapy. Interviews of, well, Kamiyama and her team interviewed 21 owners of heritage. During the interview process, close to 80% of the subjects spoke of how they felt gratitude concerning their experience of the salvage process and how they had come to an awareness of the importance of their role in carrying on their family's history. However, salvage operations for people whose property suffered only partial damage tended to be carried out more than 6 months after the disaster. In this case, the probability that people would associate negative feelings with the salvage experience and their own family heritage showed a clear tendency to increase. I'd like to show you 2 cases of people who were interviewed and what they had to say. The first case we will call case A. She is a woman who lost both her husband and her son-in-law, in the tsunami, and only the foundations of her house remained. The events involving her family during the tsunami left her ostracized from her family and community and relatives. No one wanted to talk to her, no one liked her. Furthermore, the whole community had to be relocated into a safer area after the tsunami, but A had moved to a different town and was physically isolated from her community and relatives as well. A member of our group, we're calling Professor C, had participated in a project initiated by the local government in her A's region to digitally record A's family collection of documents before the tsunami. He contacted her by mobile phone after the tsunami and visited her in the relief center. Then later on the 15th of December 2015, Professor C and other members of our group visited A again in her new house and presented her with a complete set of the printouts of the digital records. This is her house. You can see this is the printouts here, which she has put in front of the digital, the Buddhist altar, and the photos of the members of her family who died in the tsunami are there, and she is showing them that they have recovered their heritage. Another important event for A was that Professor C also used her family documents to write a booklet in the publishing series that I showed you. Now, if you could look at the words, these are words that A-san said in her interview. Her words fall into 3 groups. She shows conflicting feelings about the tsunami, but Professor C's booklet summarizing the history of her family and how her ancestors had helped the community in times of hardship has a strong positive effect. And Knowing the history of her family has helped not only herself, but also her extended family and her former community to rebuild their ties with each other. When A summed up what the experience meant for her, she said, "I realized the meaning of why I was born into this world." Reframing and understanding how her family had helped her community in the interview process made it possible to conquer her initial death wish, and she came to recognize that she had an important role in passing on her family name. The next case, we'll call him B-Son. He's a man in his 60s. He summed his experience up in 2 sentences. "The earthquake is one part of our history, so I want to preserve the traces of it." Another one, "This is very unusual. Thanks to the tsunami, this place was really cleaned up." A-Son was the head of a once wealthy merchant family. He was a sailor and experienced an earthquake in 1978 in a boat directly above the epicenter. He started researching the history of disasters in his town and reached the conclusion that the port city where he lived would be sometime subjected to a mega earthquake and tsunami. Since the last major tsunami was 400 years ago, no one remembered it, and he was considered a crank by his neighbors. Another important event for him was seeing TV reportage on our activities after another earthquake that occurred in 2005. On 11th of March 2011, you can see this view from this hill. This is where he was standing, watching the tsunami wash almost everything he owned away. His house survived, actually. Because he had expected this kind of event while everyone around him was reduced to tears, he was already starting to think about how to rebuild his community. He contacted us by phone to ask us to salvage the documents in his old warehouse, which was the only building among the wreckage to survive the odds of the tsunami. We conducted our first salvage after the tsunami on the 8th of April at his warehouse. That was the slide I showed you first up. The key to understanding the attitudes expressed by B would be disaster science literacy. His attitudes fall into 4 groups: disaster literacy, self-esteem, linking, and ego integrity. His keywords are expressed as single vocabulary items, but in his case, conflicting attitudes are expressed in his self-integration. His feelings of gratitude towards people who helped him after the disaster intertwined with the disaster, which linked him to these people. His sense of linkages expresses his own position in the timeline of his family and community history. The warehouse. When B was talking about preserving the traces of the thing, what he's referring to is this warehouse. Remember the warehouse in the very first shot. You can see it's put on wooden piles here, and we had to move it a few centimeters each day because this was due to be demolished due to the urban replanning that was going to be carried out. And today, the warehouse serves as a repository of community memories. A lot of the material that was in the warehouse was damaged in the tsunami, but as other families throughout the region started to clean out their warehouses after the tsunami, people started donating various items. For example, he lost his family's original gramophone player and collection of antique wax records, but now he has 5 gramophone players and a very large collection of wax records. To sum up, both A and B are elderly people without unlimited time left them to rebuild their lives anew from scratch. However, by meeting and interacting with MSN, they became able to accept the reality of the disaster and to discover some positive meaning in all the lost in wreckage. In psychological terms, the disaster taken as a whole experience enabled them to reconstruct their ego integrity within the span of their life cycle. The key to understanding the benefits of restoring memory in any form is that psychological health and disorders and a healthy sense of self-conception and a healthy self-conception are deeply intertwined with memory. That's some concluding marks. Not all heritage is world heritage, national heritage, heritage from long ago, or even good heritage, but even so, it is still our heritage. The dividing line between heritage and garbage is blurred, ever-changed, and contested. It is a disaster can tear communities apart and alter familiar landscapes. But saving anything that records the past, the little history of a community, can provide its members with links to love but lost people and landscapes. These links transcend time, both past and future. They can give people driven into a dead end a different perspective to see themselves and each other, and provide a starting point for rebuilding lost human bonds and finding a way out of a dead end. However, not only disasters, but long-term socioeconomic changes such as commercial development can change societies and landscapes beyond recognition within a short span of time. Saving local heritage should be done before disaster strikes. The majority of material we rescue is actually less than 100 years old. You don't have to have thousands of years of heritage. Photos, old home movies, diaries, personal letters, school class records, ledger books and other records of commercial activities, posters, can all become a window into some aspect of a community's past. And the work of volunteer groups such as MSN in Miyagi provide a cogent example of how items recording the history of a community can be transformed from garbage into heritage. Properly done, this whole process can become a powerful form of psychosocial support for everyone involved and for the broader community as well. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, John, Professor Morris. And
hang on, I'm trying to stop my thing here. This is a little bit complicated.
It's fine, you take your time.
Hey.
Thank you.
Okay, here we are, thank you. Right.
Thank you for these valuable insights and the work which is very meaningful that you and Professor Machiko have been doing. As you have rightly pointed out, connections with the past help to establish meaning in life after suffering death and trauma. That this trauma affects people not immediately, but over a period of time has also some implications for us in the heritage field. We need to consider people's mental health needs over a period of time and see how in long-term recovery we can enhance their coping abilities by engaging them with their heritage, with their memories. With these words, I would like to invite questions from our attendees. I see that there have some questions that have been sent to us via email. So I would invite my panel to open their cameras, and I will ask some questions to them on behalf of the group here. So thank you. And John, may request you to join us, and Amira also, if you can. Amira, connection.
Yes, already. Okay.
Thank you so much. So my first question is actually to Amira. You were not able to really explain before, but could you just explain how this excessive demand for digitization and access to heritage, remote access to heritage, is affecting people working in heritage sector in Egypt? Could you please explain that?
Yes, in Egypt now we have 2 or 3 mega projects. One of them is the Grand Egyptian Museum. The other one is the museum, the National Museum of Civilizations, and they are one of due to the pandemic. Of course, we didn't close working on those projects, and we have to complete them. So the whole staff and of professionals and are still working, and of course they are. We have a fear with them that they have the fear of catching the disease and transfer it to their beloveds. So this is why most of them have a choice to do, which is that they separated themselves from their families, and they send their families to other states, to countrysides, and they still doing their work here. What we need is that we don't have any psychological support for them. Of course, they are not working in a very good statement. And in the same time, because that everybody is locked down, we have like a kind of half lockdown here in Egypt. So the institutions are asking to make more products related to digitalization. For example, to make like a kind of videos, a kind of 36 movies to explore the culture side, and to make like a virtual tours for people who and disseminated it through Facebook or through the social media.
Okay.
A lot of professionals are doing a lot of work to achieve such an output that they have to deliver it in time.
Okay.
This is from the side of the staff who is working hardly, but from the other side, is the virtual, or can I say the digital work, is very effective with the community itself or not? I think we have a very high demand on it at the beginning of the crisis, but the time have a very crucial role here, because after 1 or 2 or 3 months, people like now want to go to the site itself. They have like a kind of nostalgia. Even the digital work doesn't give them this kind of to connect with their memories, and they want, even the new generation, of course, they want that they transfer this knowledge to the new generation. So I think the digital work and the virtual tours and every kind of this production is very important, yes, of course. But by the time we have to think about the connection between the person and the place, because the core of the heritage was 3 pillars: the people, the place, and of course the time.
Thank you. Thank you for that valuable insight, that what you're trying to say is that we have to be time sensitive. And that brings me to another question to Linda this time. Linda, what about when you mentioned that you are downscaling? On one hand, we heard from Egypt that there is work is upscaled, and you are saying that you are downscaling. And does that mean when you are downscaling or asking for people to share burden, workload of the other colleagues, does that create any issues relating to inequality in professional contribution, or any other issues in managing staff, like why you are giving special treatment to, let's say, mothers? And do you have any insights on that?
It's a potential challenge for sure. However, what I need to emphasize is that for professional contribution, it's important that you have everything in order at home. And to make that work, we need to make sure that people are feeling safe. And it's not just this crisis. It's a question of general, how you organize your work in general. So having said that, it's important to keep in mind that everyone feels equally supported, that no one is taking advantage of this flexibility. For this approach to be possible, it needs to have responsible people and also a responsible overall climate in the team. So it's more difficult, I think, to organize that, but at the same time, you will get better results. So even if you look at it on a very instrumental level, you have happier people, and happier people work better. So I think that's how this system mainly works.
Thank you so much. And as you rightly point out, happier workforce makes for more creativity. It leads to more creativity. And that brings me to another question to Tamar. And I also see that there's another question which is more general, but we'll get back to that later. So Tamar, could you please very briefly give us some tips on peer-to-peer support? How can you provide peer-to-peer support?
Peer-to-peer support is really very important, especially also among cultural heritage professionals as well. We should always be available to each other in non-intrusive way. We should find a quiet place, locate relevant people that can help, family, colleagues, friends. We should always provide relevant and trustworthy information to gaining control of the situation. We should always treat the person as a colleague, not as a victim. And we should give encouragement in a very positive way. Of course, we should be always very realistic, not do unrealistic promises. And the very important thing is we should always maintain confidentiality. We should trust each other when we are talking about our thoughts, our experiences. Confidentiality is very important. And always provide follow-up, and always in non-intrusive way. This is very briefly about peer-to-peer support, which is, I think, a very interesting question about this.
Yes,
thank you.
What you are pointing out is very important about confidentiality, about maintaining trust and being non-intrusive. And that's where I think perhaps everybody needs some sort of coaching and training in dealing with these issues. And I think they should be more and more part of our training curricula as we, think about, disaster resilience or, building capacities elsewhere. And with that, I would like to also really ask Professor Morris about this idea that you brought out in your presentation about healthy self-conception and how it is linked to memory or past, and then you also showed us through examples how people have taken on the salvage activities and then subsequent digitization or putting it in printed books. So could you please expand on that a bit more and explain to us in a more simple language, perhaps? Yeah.
You want me to explain how
healthy self-conception is linked with memory?
Okay. I'm trying, that is a very, very big question. When we think of who we are, we look back to what we have done to define who we are. And when we look back, we can look back, for example, what I have done as an individual and what the people who are linked to me have done. And those links can be links acquired through your bloodline. Or, for example, I have migrated from Australia to Japan, but living and being involved in research in the history of the region where I live has made me a citizen of the area where I live. The past does not always have to be the past owned by particular people. If moving into a group and participating some way in recovering the communal memory of that area can also help people join. A lot of the volunteers who work with us are not actually local people, but people like me who have moved into the region. And they acquire local identity by preserving local heritage. The other thing is that the area in Japan, where I live, the image of this area in Japanese history is we only feature is if we lose a war, if there's a famine, or there's a tsunami. It's all minus imagery. Whereas the activities of the group that I'm working with, what we are doing is to build, show that people were not always poor, to show that people did do very interesting and wonderful things. And that can change the communal self-perception. If anyone who lives in a major city doesn't understand this, but if you live in a peripheral region, if you go to a big city, you have to speak with the right accent. You can't speak with your local accent or people will laugh at you. And that is getting a better self-perception of what has happened in your region can help people overcome that communal sense of loss of worth, of not having any worth. The examples I gave you in tonight's presentation are examples of individual people and their communities. But the publishing work we're doing actually is helping the whole region try and see themselves in a different light, in a more positive light. You can't change everything, but this is it adds to the positive energy that helps people recover after a disaster. Does that make any sense?
Yes, really. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I'm not too sure myself that it has made a lot of sense, but.
Very insightful.
Aparna, a very good example of psychosocial support is getting a lot of people who are overworked and don't know how to communicate with each other to communicate on real time by net right now. This seminar is a wonderful form of psychosocial support.
Thank you. Thank you for that vote of confidence.
The expert next to me just told me that I have to tell you all that.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. We also thank Professor Kamiyama for that.
Right.
But I would like to now pose one question, and after that we will close. This is to all panelists, and it is coming from our audience. Is it possible to know more on lessons learned after any crisis? So I would like to give it to all panelists one by one. You can intervene and share what you have learned from crises personally, and which goes and also extends on to today's topic on psychosocial support. Okay, so who would like to go first?
I can start. Actually, I will emphasize once again what I've said before. In every crisis, we need to prioritize. Prioritizing is something that is, whatever happens, you can't do everything. And especially in a crisis, there will be new tasks that you will need to resolve, and therefore you cannot continue doing things the way you did before. That for starters. And the second aspect here, what I would like to emphasize with this crisis, has been lessons learned with how you cope with working with people without really interacting them physically, because often what we see online, even one-on-one, having a video call, is still very different from what you perceive from a person when talking to that person face to face. So that is definitely a difficulty, something we need to work with, something we need to develop, and sort of a better understanding. But for the very most important part, I would still say prioritizing.
Thank you. Tamar, would you like to say something? Thank you.
Yes, it's really thank you for the question. It's an interesting one. First of all, we see that we should adapt to the situation, and we can manage. We can overcome the situation together. This situation really, the world will change. And I think after this crisis, we will value our relationships, our friendships, our family members, our daily activities and routine that was really normal for us. We will value it more. And maybe after the crisis, I'm always try to find the positive aspects of this, that we will really will be changed in a positive way, and we will value everything more. So let's see what will happen after this crisis, after the coronavirus will finish, and maybe we will have also more information, more feedback. Maybe there will be some other researches about this as well, and we would be happy to share this as well, because corona is not finished yet. So we are in this process of the crisis.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamar. We are still in the crisis. And with that, I also, what you said is very important, that we have to value what we have in terms of our relationships. So that brings me to Amira. Would you like to say something, Amira, about the lessons learned?
That we have to cooperate. I think after this crisis, we can find that we have to come together to look to. If we have a problem, we have to coordinate and cooperate together. Of course, prioritization and working in a team. This is a very important thing. But also to connect a person to person is a very important, like Linda has said, and to cooperate, because without cooperation and everybody, if he will think about himself only, we will lose. We will lose a lot of our humanity, even our stories, a lot of things will be losing. So to transfer this to the next generation, we have to cooperate now.
Thank you so much. And Professor Morris, because now we are running out of time, so if you have a one-liner, like something, words of wisdom, which you would like to share with us on lessons learned?
Two things. Your ability to deal with any crisis is a sum of the interpersonal relationships that you have built before the disaster. The problem with COVID-19 is that what is different about this from other disasters is that it physically breaks relationships apart. And to deal with it, the real problem is, how do we keep the relationships which keep us sane, which give us resilience in the face of what is really scary about COVID is the fact that you've got to keep apart. And that is the really scary part. And that is the real problem. What is the answer? Well, this symposium itself is one answer, but I think that is what we are all trying to explore and learn as we go.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And as you rightly pointed out, we are still learning. We are in the crisis, but webinars like this one are certainly paving way for us to understand better and to give voice to these issues. Thank you very much. I thank everybody for their contribution. I would like to thank all the attendees for participating in this webinar and also patiently being with us, even though we have run our time. I would also like to thank our panelists for their respective contributions, which brought out many, many important points. At the same time, I'm grateful for the ICROM organizing team that has helped us in the preparation of this webinar. The recorded version of this webinar will be shortly made available on ICROM website and YouTube channel. The next webinar will be on traditional knowledge for resilience in post-COVID, and which you can join at the same time next Friday, 12th June. Please log on into ICROM website and social media platforms for details. Thank you very much for being with us here today, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.